Hi, I'm Ryan from RTINGS.com. Today we'll be comparing two TVs from Samsung, the Samsung QN90A and the Samsung QN85A. We'll be evaluating both of them on our standardized test bench to see how they compare and which one you should buy. We bought the 55-inch of both of these TVs. The QN90A sits higher up in Samsung's 2021 lineup, implying better performance but also a higher cost than the QN85A. Is it worth shelling out a bit more for the higher-end model? Let's find out. The stand of both TVs are similar in style, but the QN90A has a solid metal base instead of a mix of plastic and metal. Both have cable management tracks to help keep your setup clean. The inputs of both TVs are located on the left-hand side. The range of ports is the same, with 4 HDMI ports, USB ports, and digital optical audio connections for an external sound system. They also both have a single HDMI 2.1 port for higher bandwidth signals, but we can talk about the impact of this later in the comparison. Both of these TVs have a textured plastic back and include VESA mounting holes if you want to put them on the wall. They're basically the same thickness and will stick out a bit, but this is pretty typical. The build quality of both TVs is great. The stand of the higher-end QN90A feels a bit more solid, but we don't expect people to have issues with either. Now, let's compare them on our tests. A high contrast ratio means deep dark scenes, which is good if you want to watch movies in a dark room like a home theater environment. The QN90A is definitely the superior between the two. Even with Samsung's ultra viewing angle layer, which lowers the overall native contrast, it's noticeably better than the QN85A on our test pattern, which is only okay. In the case of these Samsungs, the QN90A uses a VA panel and the QN85A uses an ADS panel, which is a type of IPS panel. This means we would expect to see that the QN90A has a much better contrast than the QN85A, which looks to be true based on our results. Local dimming is a feature to further improve dark scenes for a better movie watching experience. Both TVs use a mini LED backlight and uses a combined 576 zones each to illuminate or dim their screens as needed for local dimming. Both TVs have this feature, and it helps immensely on the QN90A compared to the QN85A, at least on our test pattern. The thing with test patterns is that they don't always tell the whole story. During testing, we noticed that the QN85A looked better in some real content than the test pattern suggested. We did some digging and found that we could get better contrast ratios on our pattern with local dimming enabled in different picture modes. Game mode allowed us to get the best result, but even then, it wasn't as good technically as the QN90A. When comparing them side by side, the QN90A has a better implementation of local dimming overall. If you want to use the TV in a bright room, then a high peak brightness is important to overcome glare and help make images pop. The brightness of both TVs is excellent, and you should be happy with either. That said, the QN90A is going to be brighter in both SDR and HDR, which can help to make for a more impactful viewing experience. Also important for a bright room is good reflection handling, especially when watching dark scenes where the brightness can't compensate. Take a look at the reflection photos of both TVs. You'll notice that the QN85A is more of an expected mirror-like surface, whereas the QN90A is dispersing the light horizontally and colorfully. The rainbow stretching of the light is caused by the ultra-wide viewing angle layer I mentioned earlier. However, with the display on, they're very similar and make a great option for a room with lots of light. If you've got a wide seating arrangement or like to watch TV with family and friends, then good viewing angles help to ensure no one's left with washed out colors or crushed details. As mentioned earlier, the QN85A uses an ADS panel and the QN90A uses a VA panel. This means that we expect the QN85A to perform better, and it does. However, thanks to that ultra-wide viewing angle layer, the QN90A does a better job than most other VAs in keeping its accuracy off angle, but unfortunately, not as well as the QN85A. An overall uniform screen brightness and color is important when watching sports or playing video games, to avoid the appearance of clouding known as the dirty screen effect. This does vary between units, but the models we bought are in line with what we expect. Both do have some vertical lines in the gray uniformity, but it is often not noticeable in real content. The QN85A native black uniformity has some noticeable backlight bleed, but this TV always has local dimming enabled, so this isn't really a problem as the feature cuts away all the problem areas. If you plan to watch newer high dynamic range or HDR content, then vivid colors are important to produce highlights that really pop. Unsurprisingly, the QN90A has the advantage here. While the QN85A isn't too far behind, the better TV when it comes to displaying more shades and saturated tones of colors is the QN90A. Some TVs struggle to display smooth gradients, so when watching a movie with a sunset, some banding can be visible. These two TVs are basically the same when it comes to their gradient processing. Both do a great job of handling gradients, and both have a noise reduction setting that can help to improve it in real content. When playing video games, a fast response time is important for the clearest image without distracting blur. Both TVs are fast and have a good response time overall, but the QN90A is a bit faster. You may notice some smearing and dark scenes on both. A low input lag is also important for a responsive feel when playing video games, and in this case, these TVs are almost identical. The slight differences between them are imperceptible, and since both can do 4K 120Hz, neither one has an advantage over the other. Speaking of gaming, both the QN90A and the QN85A completely support all the features of the Xbox Series X and PS5. They also have a handy game bar that shows you a generalized input lag speed, the FPS of the content, whether HDR is enabled, and which VRR is working. Both TVs use the same smart platform, Tizen. It's improved a little since last year and has gotten a bit faster. While the QN90A appeared to be a bit faster, it'll hardly be noticeable at all. It has all the apps and everything you need to watch directly from the TV without any external devices, and is pretty easy to navigate. Keep in mind, in order to get the game bar to appear, you need to be in game mode. Now, lastly, for the sound. The QN90A is a bit better and has far less distortion, but overall both of them are just okay. If you want some good sound, it's definitely better to get a dedicated speaker system or even a soundbar. So this brings us to the main question: which one should you buy? The QN90A is the one you should buy. While the QN85A has slightly better viewing angles due to the ADS panel, the QN90A is essentially just a noticeably better version in every other aspect. And the reason you should mostly ignore the QN85A is because of the pricing scheme. The QN85A isn't much cheaper than the QN90A. If you think you can afford a little bit more, it's easily worth going for the QN90A for a better performance. That said, the QN85A often gets a bigger discount, but unless it's extremely priced down, the QN90A is worth the extra couple of bucks.